and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm Elliott Margolis. I'm here with my co-host, Gail Burke, and our guest today is Karen Andreas, and she is the publisher of the North of Boston Media Group. Karen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
And tell us first, what is the North of Boston Media Group?
So we are an award-winning media group, and we have 4 daily newspapers. The largest is the Eagle Tribune, based in North Andover. Then we have the Salem News, the Daily News of Newburyport, and the Gloucester Daily Times. Also have 4 weekly newspapers, the Andover Townsman, the Haverhill Gazette, the Derry News in Derry, New Hampshire, and the Carriagetown News in Kingston, New Hampshire. We also have 13 magazines, including North of Boston Business, Newburyport Magazine, Marblehead Magazine, the Andovers, etc., and all of our affiliated websites. So it's a very large media group. I employ about 330 people.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
Your job is publisher.
Yes.
What do you do?
So publisher is basically the CEO of the company. Fancy title in the newspaper industry for running that group of newspapers. So everything from the newsrooms to marketing to advertising, the press room, all our commercial print, delivery, customer service, etc. Everything runs up through to the publisher. And I have a wonderful executive team, each with their own discipline, and they're the best, absolute best.
That must keep you pretty busy.
Yeah, pretty busy.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good. I know you've been doing it for a while. I remember working with you many moons ago.
Oh, I've only been doing it for, just a little while. Really, more than 30 years now.
Really? I think I met you when you first started.
Probably. I was a reporter. I was a cub reporter for the Beverly Times.
Okay.
Actually, I started when I was in college. I went to UNH, and I was an intern in the summertime at the Daily News of Newburyport. Okay. So that was my best job ever. Of course, interning in Newburyport for the summer, that was wonderful. But then I got a job right out of college as a reporter at the Beverly Times.
No, I met you. I was on the Salem News Advisory Board about 20 years ago, I guess.
Oh, sure.
I think you had just started.
Maybe I was the editor at the time.
That could be. Dave Olson was there.
Oh, yeah.
That's one of the editors, too.
Yes, Dave is our current editor for the Salem News and the Gloucester Daily Times.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, well, let's get down to a little business here. One of the things that I would say annoys me a bit is the lack of objectivity of the press nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that a lot of the press, well, they don't like Trump. That's a given. But they're not objective. They're very biased in their reporting, and you see that in virtually every newspaper out there. Why is that? Why can't they be objective? Or let's face it, whether you like it or not, Trump's the president.
Yes.
And whether you like it or not, he's doing a job, and he's done some good things. He's done some things that maybe not so good. That's understood. But he doesn't get credit for anything. And can you explain that as to why that is? I mean, is there a total lack of objectivity in the press nowadays?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a total lack of objectivity. The newspapers that we have at North of Boston Media Group mainly deal with local news. So we cover local issues. That is our bread and butter. But I, of course, like you, follow the national press, and I've been involved with the national press. I was on the the advisory board of the Poynter Institute in St. Pete, Florida, which is basically the premier educator and think tank for working journalists worldwide. And I was on that board for 4 years recently. So I agree with you that there are a lot of journalists who come at stories from a particular bias. And there should be and must be a difference between factual news reporting and opinion reporting. And the lines have been blurred a lot as of late, really blurred. And that disturbs me because as a journalist, whether a national journalist or a local journalist, it's imperative, in my opinion, that we are objective, fair, honest, and coming at stories so that we tell both sides. We tell one side and the other side and let the reader make his or her own informed opinion. That's my objective with everything that I do with my newspapers. We're not perfect. We are not perfect, but we're good people who are really trying to present local news issues in an unbiased manner. Now, on the opinion pages, that's different. So the editorial page of a newspaper will have an editorial, which is the opinion of the newspaper, typically the daily opinion of the newspaper, and letters to the editor and opinions from the community. And a really good newspaper will allow for a really good newspaper will allow for back and forth between people who have differing opinions. And that doesn't, if a newspaper prints a letter to the editor, that doesn't mean that the newspaper agrees with that opinion or doesn't agree with that opinion. So it's really important to me that we have diverse opinions on our editorial pages, but not in the news section. The news section itself needs to be factual and unbiased, fair always, and written with the utmost integrity.
Well, you get a lot of news, your national news from what, the AP, UPI, New York Times, those types of.
We subscribe to the Associated Press, so we are using national news stories from the Associated Press.
Let me ask you a question about the Associated Press.
Yes.
I came across an article this morning where the Associated Press says it will capitalize the word black when talking about Black Lives Matter or Black people, but not white. That remains small letters. Mm-hmm. A number of news agencies have decided to do the same thing. To me, that's rather biased. And I don't know what your newspaper will do with that.
Our newspapers follow what's called AP style, and that is a standard in the industry. So yes. The Associated Press puts out what they call their style book, and everything from exactly that. When do you capitalize? When do you do not? Etc. So that is a discussion that our editors are having right now to determine what style we will follow when we write those stories. So just because the Associated Press put it out doesn't mean we have to follow that style. So that's a discussion we're having right now, and really would love to know the opinion of our readers. And I really encourage people to call me, email me, write to me and the local editors and let us know what you want for your local newspaper. Because, I can sit in my office or in my home office, family room, wherever, and I don't want to make decisions in a vacuum. I want to know what our readers want because it's your newspaper. You have expectations for your newspaper, and I hope you hold us to very high standards to quality ethical reporting, to good writing, to employing great people who are members of the community. That if there's a mistake in the paper or you disagree with something, you can call us and Paul Layton will pick up the phone and discuss it with you, or Ethan Foreman will call you back. So these are people who care about the community, that live here, that pay taxes, that are trying to do the right thing, that are good people that you can have a discussion with. You may not always agree, but you know that they're in the newsroom, you know who they are. You're not just blindly emailing someone and wondering, gee, I wonder who the publisher is or who the editor is or who is that reporter that wrote that story.
Well, I know Paul personally, and he is a good guy.
He's a good guy. Yeah.
He and I disagree most of the time, but that's okay because you can have a discussion with Paul.
Exactly.
But I've got a couple of friends who have told me that they've written letters to the editor and they're conservative and they don't get printed. I haven't seen the letters. I can't tell you the content of them, but they say they have a hard time getting things printed because they're conservative.
Well, that's disappointing to me to hear, although I will say that we do have standards for the editorial page that we have to follow. So the editors always look at these letters to the editor and make sure they're not libelous, they're based in fact, and that they adhere to certain writing standards in terms of length and such. So a lot of times people will write to me personally and say, you know, I sent my letter to the editor to editor so-and-so and he hasn't published it. And then they'll send it to me and I'll look at it and talk to the editor and we'll discuss why this didn't run. More often than not, there are problems with the letter, and the writer sometimes doesn't want to listen to that. Or the editor does have a discussion with the person and they come to some sort of agreement and it can get published. But we want to publish all sorts of diverse opinions. That's what the opinion page is for. So if anyone ever is having trouble getting a letter published, I encourage you to first start with the editor of that newspaper. And we have an executive editor, David Joyner, who is in charge of all of the newsrooms. So you can always talk to David Joyner and you can always talk to me. So if there are people having trouble getting a letter published, please don't just stop and think, oh, I have no chance of getting my letter published. You really should talk to the editors and talk to me, and we'll have a discussion about why it why it will or will not run. Absolutely.
Okay, now let me ask you this, because there's been a lot of things in the AP over the past few months about COVID that has basically turned out to be wrong. Like, for instance, they said that Trump called the COVID a hoax. When he didn't call COVID a hoax, he basically said the Democrats are trying to make it a hoax. Or they said that Trump defunded the CDC, or the National Institute of Health, when in fact, when you look at the evidence, he increased their spending, their funds. And what I don't see is when they make up these kinds of things, obviously it's an election year, they want to hurt Trump. But when it's proven wrong, I don't see the apologies. Does your paper put an apology in? Because when you find out that they're wrong.
If you're speaking to local issues?
Yeah, well, I'm speaking basically of Trump now, and you deal a lot with the AP, and they put a lot of false information out. When you find out it's false, do you say that we printed this and it turned out not to be true?
We will always write a correction when we make an error in some way, whether it's from a local story that one of our journalists have written or Associated Press. Always we will correct it. We don't run many Associated Press stories in print. We really stick to the local issues for my newspapers. That's, as I said, our franchise, our bread and butter. So in terms of the national scene, the Associated Press and such, that's really not what I deal with. So, but in general terms, with our local stories, we have a policy for corrections, and it does include always fact checking. If we're human, if we make a mistake, we will write a correction. We will call that person or persons affected by the correction and say, I'm really sorry. I made this mistake. I'm correcting it in tomorrow's paper. And it won't happen again. So 9 out of 10 cases, or 99 out of 100, the person says, thank you so much. Thank you for calling me, letting me know, and correcting that. So that's what we do on a local level. The apology or, admission that, gee, I'm very sorry, we made a mistake, usually comes, if not directly from the reporter, which we like it to, but it will come from the editor as well. There'll be an exchange, whether an email or phone call.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you a question about schools reopening. And what, if anything, have you done any research or have you done any reporting about what the National Education Association is up to when it comes to school opening? Because it seems that they do not want the schools to reopen unless certain criteria are met, which have nothing to do with COVID, with safety, with any of that. But it seems to me that not only the NEA, but a lot of the politicians have taken it upon themselves to arbitrarily make these decisions about what's opening, what's closing, what has to stay open, what doesn't have to stay open. And I haven't seen a lot in the newspaper about the fact that schools in other countries have opened successfully. Some of them haven't closed at all. But here in the United States, they were just shut down. Mm-hmm. And I think your paper could be very helpful in coming at it from the point of view, what's happening with the children that are not allowed to go to school? What's happening, what's going to happen when they do eventually reopen? Are they going to reopen completely? Are they going to be on different sessions like that has been suggested? And what about the parents who have to go back to work? What do the children do? What do the parents do? Some of them may not be able to go back to work. Or many of them have lost their jobs. So, I mean, there's a whole economic reasoning in play here. And I haven't seen much of that portrayed in any of the newspapers.
Well, we always come at it from a local angle, again, so stories that are discussed on a national level, of course, we will try to break it down for what's happening locally. Mm-hmm. So I do know that the staff reporters are working on their own local school districts, going to the school committee meetings, talking to the superintendents, talking to the athletic directors, and the North Shore Chamber of Commerce, for example, has been doing a series on local openings. The Merrimack Valley Chamber has been doing the same. So we report on those discussions. There's been a lot of talk about the local colleges that we're reporting on. So we always come at it from a local angle of what do our readers want to know about their local school districts and how the kids and families and teachers will be affected here. So they're still working on those plans here. As you know, there is not anything definitive about what will happen for school reopening. So as those decisions are made and progress, certainly we will report on that locally.
Okay.
It's a really important issue for so many people. I agree.
Well, it's absolutely, especially for the children, because they need to be with their schoolmates. They need to be socializing and not just by computer or their smartphones or whatever.
I just heard that there is no case in the entire world where a school-age kid, has infected an adult. So that to me is a kind of an interesting twist on this. And I know I have friends who are teachers, and they're concerned, some of them are my age. I won't talk about what that is, but we're in the age bracket of it's more concerning for us to get the disease than a kid. And there's no evidence that kids are transferring the disease. So I don't know if you've heard that statistic or not, but I also heard that in Sweden, they never closed the schools, and Finland did, and yet the rates of getting the disease and passing away from the disease are the same. So I guess my question would be, is that something that would be printable in the newspaper to help make a decision like this for the communities?
Well, only if we can fact check it and determine that it's true, because as we all know, there's so much information out there. So you have to make sure that it's from a reputable source and reliable. But again, we come at our reporting from a local standpoint. So if that fact was true and fact checked, that would be something that might be pertinent to a story, of course. But we would take the angle of how does this affect local decisions?
Yeah.
Well,
right.
I think the storyline could be what effect does not going to school have on children from kindergarten? You could go through college as well. But I mean, the rate of suicide is increasing. And, the children they're learning supposedly on their computers, but there's nothing better than having a teacher, a good teacher there to ask questions about, to direct you in a certain way, to praise you, to not praise you, whatever. And that's not happening. And they've been closed now, I think, since March. I think it was the end of March when they closed. And we all hoped it would pass quickly, but it's not. So I don't know what the local schools, how they're discussing whether or not to open, how to do it. I know I've heard that, of course, they always need more money. Are you going to require children to wear masks all day? That's ridiculous. Little kids wearing masks all day is not a healthy environment.
The state of Massachusetts is requiring it for kids to wear masks. That I know. Karen, when do you plan to go back to your office?
Oh, I'm in all the time. I'm back and forth all the time. Today, I'm going in about 1:30 for some work to do this afternoon. So I'm basically between my home office and my main office, which is at the Eagle Tribune in North Andover. I also have an office at the Salem News. So we have 7 different locations. And the majority of staff, well, I shouldn't say majority. We're slowly coming back to work from the offices. Our offices are still closed to the public, but we have, I'd say about 50% of the staff are back now. Of course, we've had to have the press room and our packaging center, and a lot of folks have been working from the office the entire time, and they're absolute troopers, warriors, just doing an unbelievable job to do the best they can for the community to get the paper out. There's so much that goes into producing news, and it's not just the reporting. It's everything from the selling the advertising, creating the ad, the graphics for the ads, delivering the newspapers, printing the newspapers. There's so much to do, and it has been very, very challenging, shall we say, to continue with all of this during the pandemic. But the staff that we have is the best. They'll put them up with anyone in the country, in the world, and we've done an amazing job continuing to deliver news both in print and online to our readers and advertisers.
Were you forced to lay anybody off, Karen?
I'm sorry?
Were you forced to lay anybody off?
Goodness, we have not laid off anyone. We've had to furlough some people.
Mhm.
So hopefully those furloughs are temporary. And we've done some reductions in pay. But we've had to do that in order to control our expenses because the advertising revenue has just not come back yet. It's coming back slowly, but that's understandable because businesses are tentative. They're just starting to open. They're getting their feet wet again as well. So, a local restaurant may be open, but they're not sure what that means for them. So they're not ready to advertise again.
Right.
So our revenues come mainly from advertising, and we just have not had a recovery there yet. And that's why we've had to make the tough decisions about discontinuing printing on 2 days, which really has saved us a lot of money in printing costs. Mm-hmm. But we're still delivering the news digitally on those days.
I get it online, yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, thank you.
Well,
most people have been very understanding about it, really understanding about the need, what we're doing, to stay in business. Yeah. And they understand that local news is so important to the vibrant community. And they respect the newspapers and respect the local journalists and know we're doing the very best we can. There are some who are disappointed that we're not publishing every day. But I will talk to them on the phone. I'll call them back. I'll email them and have discussions and say, I'm doing the very best I can. I cannot afford to print on these days right now. Hopefully that will come back in the future. But I don't see it happening anytime soon because the recovery, the economic recovery has not been there to allow for stability of our advertising revenues.
Now, we're running out of time, but I just wanted to ask, you closed Dunham Road in Beverly, correct?
Yes, we sold the building, yes.
And so now you're printing from where?
Well, I print all of the products from one location in North Andover. So the Eagle Tribune on 114 across from Merrimack College, yep. That's our main office. And we have our printing facility there, and it's a really large building. So a lot of folks work from that office for the regional company, North of Boston Media Group. And then we have the smaller locations so that we can have the local presence of the newsroom and advertising staff locally in the communities. So that office on Dunham Road that I sold, that used to be the headquarters years ago. So the majority of it was vacant. I had about 30 people working out of an enormous building, and it just didn't make sense for me to keep those maintenance costs anymore. So I sold that building last year, and now we have an office for the Salem News in Danvers, and that's working out great for us because it's large enough to have the local staff there, but small enough to keep my expenses under control, and it really has made sense for the company.
Where is it in Danvers?
It's on Rosewood Drive, so it's off of 114. It's a great location for us because it's close to all the highways and the local roads so that our delivery drivers can get there easily. We have a warehouse there also, so the newspapers are printed in North Andover. We truck them to that local office, and then the delivery staff meets there in the wee hours of the morning and gets their papers and can deliver them locally to stores and homes for the Salem News customers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, we're running out of time, but first of all, it's good seeing you again. I haven't seen you in a long time.
It's good to see you too.
And thank you for helping us out with this. And this was a great conversation. And I hope people will appreciate the papers more and everything that you do, because that's part of what this was all about.
Local news is so important to a community. Just imagine your community without a local news source. It would be terrible. So I really implore and encourage people to support their local newspaper, whether it's the Gloucester Daily Times, the Salem News, the Daily News of Newburyport, for whether you subscribe online only or for both print and online. We need your support in order to be able to pay our journalists and others for what we do. So we're in a strong position because we've made the necessary cuts financially. So we're doing well right now in terms of being able to continue to support our local communities as the #1 news source. But we need readers. We need people to stick with us and help us get through this pandemic. So I thank every single person that cares about their local newspaper and does subscribe.
Well, thank you for coming on, Karen. It's been a pleasure doing this interview with you.
It's a pleasure as well. Please call me or email me anytime on any subject, whether you need to get a letter to the editor, into the newspaper, whether you have questions about stories, whether you have story ideas. It's really important that we have that dialogue because, as I've said, this is your newspaper. We're here for the community. So I'm very, very open-minded to discussing with people what they want in their newspaper. We may not always agree, but we'll end up friends at the end of the conversation, and we'll have a healthy back and forth and a good discussion. And you'll know that we're trying to do the right thing.
Great. Thank you very much, Karen.
Thank you.
We'll talk again.
Good to see you both. Thank you.